Dominicans, we need our electoral reform. Tell Simbad, call the cabinet. Our money can just go to waste like that. Dominicans pay their money. You should perform your duty. How long before we get our reform? We have some elections in the interest of one man. But like Egypt, the people need freedom. If you cannot deliver, then give us back our dollars, sir. Stay in your lane. We know you know our country, love to spend big money, sir. Stay in your lane. The people, frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before the fall house break. The people know of Full Wash Brigade. May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what he paid, Guy Full Croise. Oh, Nana, whoa. Dominicans, woi, Dominicans. We need to fight for what we believe. Enough talking, time for action. We need reform, we need our voters card. The people pressurizing, yes, they're ready for action. How long before we get our reform? If we vote without voters ID, we could vote for other family. And before ballot can count, landslide victory. Re-election legacy concerns everybody, sir. Stay in your lane. We hear you write a report to Annie Baldesok-Woy. Stay in your lane. The people frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before reform we take. The people know of Full Wash Brigade. May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what we pay, Guy Full Croise.
All right, let me say a special good evening, a special welcome to those of you who are already locked with us right here on the space, the Civic Vibe space. We are here each and every Sunday, and so it's always a pleasure to welcome every one of you, be it you are in Dominica this time or in the region that we live, or yet even further afield. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on board. So greetings and welcome to each and every one of you. As we move along, folks, we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation tonight, a very informative one, very educational one of that. And so please, I beseech you now, I beg you now, as it were, to share that live, that device that you're listening to and watching that program on. Please use the share button and share that live so that others may know that that program is on as we speak. It is just about 5 minutes past the good old hour of 6 o'clock. And again, I want to say welcome to each and every one of you locked to the sport that you got, and that is the Civic Vibe Sport. In here with me as company this afternoon, no stranger, Brother Alvin Thomas is here as well, co-hosting the program. And so we welcome Alvin Thomas to this sport this afternoon as well. As well, we also have in our company this afternoon a very esteemed guest, a lawyer by profession, and that is none other than Miss Cara Shillingford, a very successful lawyer thus far. And I know all of you guys out there, those of you who shared the live, who shared the information in terms of the promo, you are seated, ready, and waiting for a very interesting conversation from Miss Shillingford this afternoon here. So without further ado, let me move across and say a special greetings to Brother Alvin Thomas. Greetings to you, Alvin. How are you?
Yes, Brother Lofty, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. I take it that you're doing super, super great today.
Just a bit, rushy, but I'm there doing great. Thank you very much.
All right. The weather is good on your end?
Well, yes, it had been, sunny of late, but we have had some showers for the past couple of days. But, it's a good mix. It's a good mix.
Good. Well, I'm doing great. It's a big, a long weekend for us here in the U.S. It's the Labor Day weekend, as you know. So there's a lot of action taking place. Not so much in my neck of the wood, but of course more in New York. Labor Day weekend, and tomorrow is a holiday. So it's a long weekend, nice weather, it's quite good. So it's a great Sunday afternoon. Of course, it's a pleasure to be back again in our Civic Vibes program. I see many of the folks have already logged in and saying that they are ready to partake in the program. So I'm sure this evening rather, will be another interesting conversation with the people. So like you said, we hope folks are going to share the live. I too would like to join you to say a special welcome to our friend and colleague, Cara Shillingford, attorney. She's a household name, not just in Dominica, but throughout the region. And I heard some of her presentation at the consultation, which I think was very good. Except, sometimes, as they say, the messenger is never recognized in his own country, or as they say it. But I think she made some very pertinent points, so I'm sure she'll get the opportunity to elaborate on those points with us this afternoon and bring some clarity to this burning issue of electoral reform. As I end, Lofty, let me say though, we are on the last lap of that relay. The relay ended with the last consultation a couple nights ago. So we're on the last lap right now. And I think it is now in Dominica's hands. It is in Dominicans' hand to demand the reform that they want, to demand what they want in that reform. So hopefully, within the next couple of weeks and days, we'll see how this progresses and how engaged the citizens become in such an important matter. So again, good afternoon to all the folks, and we look forward to a very interesting evening.
Yes, indeed. Alvin, thank you very much, my brother, for your opening remarks here. And I want to basically thank you for taking time off your Sunday afternoon, Alvin, to be part and parcel of the Dominican public, whether they're here or over there. Thank you very much indeed. Folks, the numbers that you can call into the program later, these numbers are 245-2396. I want to repeat, 245-2396 or 615-9470. Again, 615-9470. These are the two numbers that can get your voice in here on the conversation we are about to have here. This afternoon, folks, it is the long, drawn-out story of electoral reform that is our topic this afternoon. And we topic this conversation, electoral reform, the way forward. Again, electoral reform, the way forward. And as Alvin said, that I just want to reiterate here, Ms. Cara Shillingford at her presentation at the consultation sometime last week when I listened to her conversation, she basically was right on point with some of her points. And so that is why we chose to, invite her here, which she graciously accepted, to basically expound or go a bit further, go a bit deeper in some of the salient points she was making to us in Dominica as to the best way forward for free, fair, and transparent general elections in Dominica. Folks on the live feed, we're coming to you guys in a while, but it's Kara's time now. And so, Ms. Shillingford, good afternoon to you in a very special way.
Good afternoon, Lofty, and good afternoon, Alvin, and also to all of the viewers of this program, all of the listeners. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to speak out publicly on some of these very burning and very important issues concerning electoral reform in Dominica.
Yes, indeed. Kara, once we are on social media, lots of persons are listening, lots of persons are looking on. Just a brief intro, just who Kara Shillingford, who is this guest we have here this afternoon, in a nutshell? Maybe someone doesn't know.
Okay, I would like to, I would probably prefer to say I am who I am, but that's probably too short. I'm from the community of Salisbury, I've been born and raised in Dominica. I come from a very humble household. I was educated in Dominica, went to the Isaiah Thomas Secondary School. Then I moved on to Barbados, went to college there, and then to the University of the West Indies, where I studied law, obtained a Bachelor's of Law degree at Cave Hill. And then I moved on to the U Woodin Law School, obtaining a legal education certificate. In 2013, after completing my legal education, I returned to Dominica and got called to the bar. So I have been practicing law in Dominica and living here over the past 10 years since my return. But prior to that, I would always, return as a student and, lived my entire life here.
Yes, indeed. Well, Kara, thank you very much for, at least just letting our listeners warm up to you just a bit here as we get into the conversation here. It's always a pleasure, Kara, listening to you whenever you deliver. And so I know you won't disappoint this afternoon. Alvin, before we get going, as it were, let us look at that live feed here in terms of the names of persons who are here. Let us just shout them out. Take about 2-3 minutes to shout out some of our folks here. Let me just start. We have here Margaret Wallace is watching. Good evening to you. Marceline Edwards. Marceline Edwards is shouting Kara here and saying special greetings, Kara, from Marceline. Earl Bruno is watching. Justina James, you're there as well. Justina James is saying, you are the woman of the year. I guess that is directly in your direction, Kara, from Justina James. Claudette Lendor is saying, Bowie Strong. Celia Gordon is watching. Owen Prosper, Carla Guy, someone by the name of Unfiltered Diasporas. Manuel in Pierre is also there as well. Maria Paul, Euphali Vidal, Juanita Prince, Lone Voice, Dorian Dorival, Ivenia Joseph, Bernard Ulysses, Lafoy Julian, Simeon George, Malin Shillingford, Mary Gold, Popo is there as well. Vernie Vache, I remember that name very well. That lady correct me and say, Lofty is not Vernie Vache, it's Vernie Vache. So Vernie Vache, good afternoon to you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in, you and your husband. Euphali Vidal, I mentioned your name already. David Joseph is here saying special greetings to all of us, and he's looking forward to the program. Karen, Joseph, Cyrus, Raphael, Brother Dave, Bertrand, San Joseph. Althea Renee is there as well. Althea, good evening to you. And Jonathan and Aliyah as well. Day Jojo is there. D.A. Rose, that is my sister over there doing the thing. Good evening to you, D.A. Rose. Judith Cochran, you're also there. Lauren Lestrade, Rosa Robinson. Alvin, I need your help now.
Yeah, we have also Mali Ostries there and Janice Jean-Jacques saying good evening. And we have Glenda Burton also. We have Dory Drygo, regular.
This lady, Alvin, Glenda, she loves the Lavi-Do.
all right, Lavi-Do.
Glenda Lavi-Do Burton. She said,
yeah. Dory Drago is saying, good evening, my brother Lofty, and good evening, fellow Dominicans, logging from North Carolina. And we have Judith Cochran, I think you mentioned that. We have Miss Eliza Louise Gomes, not a regular. Of course, Marshall Lawrence. That brother is always there. So we got them. You did mention Cyrus Raphael in Los Angeles, area of Southern California. And our brother Dave Bertrand, sorry, is also there with us.
We also have Indigenous Bushman is there as well.
Indigenous Bushman, yes.
Margaret Wallace as well is saying she's excited to hear the thoughts from Cara today. That is Margaret Wallace here.
Yes, certainly.
And the list goes on and on. So folks, in the interest of time, we have to move on here. We apologize. We did not call your name, but please share.
We'll get back to the feed again before the end of the program.
Yes. All right, ladies and gents, let's get the conversation going as it were. Cara, we have been at the crossroads as it were for, I am just saying simply put, freer, fairer, and more transparent general elections in Dominica. We have been at that road for some time. It has been a long, drawn-out process. We are at the stage now where Sir Dennis Byron basically was contracted by the government of Dominica to come up with recommendations and legislations draft, that is, for our electoral process moving forward. Cara, you're a legal mind. You have looked at some of these, what Byron recommended in terms of his report and the draft legislation so far. Can you, Cara, as we start here, just give us a brief overview as to your thoughts as to what Brother Byron, Sir Dennis Byron, recommended for us moving forward as Dominicans?
Okay, well, I think that the report was very thorough and comprehensive in terms of identifying the issues as it relates to recommendations. I note that in many instances, Sir Dennis Byron did not take a position on, various issues, and basically said that, certain issues should be debated publicly, etc. So there are, for example, the issue concerning the residency requirement or domicile requirement as to whether it should remain at 5 years, whether there should be a 50-day or 90-day in Dominica requirement, or whether it should be increased to 10 years. That issue he left that question open. So, in a sense, it's a good thing that all of the burning issues were identified. But, there are certain questions, as it relates to, what the final decision should be, which Sir Byron left open. And I suppose that is, why these consultations are taking place, so that the voices of the people can be heard. My concern, however, is that, there are many people who remain silent, and, there are some very loud voices, which are, making known their position. And, I don't know if leaving these questions open, whether that was the best move. I think that there are certain clear issues, and if we are speaking about democracy, strengthening our democracy in Dominica, then the answer to some of these questions, to my mind, it's pretty clear.
Yes, indeed. And I took note you said that he left some of the more burning issues sort of in an open-ended fashion, and leaving it up to Dominicans to basically navigate their way as it pertains to these issues. Why, Cara, did you, think that he left some of these issues open, as it were, in your own mind?
Well, reading the reports, I have certain mixed reactions because, for example, when Sir Byron dealt with the issue of whether there should be a voter ID card or a national ID, He basically said on page 25 of his report that he's recommended the national ID card because he is proposing to follow the government's policy. But despite saying that he is recommending the national ID card in order to follow the government's policy, in that the government had already drafted legislation concerning the national ID, he made sure to point out and highlight some of his concerns with the national ID card. So as to his reasons for doing this, I really cannot say. I do not know whether it is that, he was mindful of the fact that in order for this report to bear any fruit, there needed to be some level of acceptance by the government, the sitting government. Your guess would be as good as mine. But, that is just, some of the areas where I noticed that he did not take any particular strong position on. If you look at the report, I think it's at about page 25, he highlighted some of the issues that he has with the national ID card. And, maybe later on in the program, I can go through what he says about, the national ID card versus the voter's ID card.
True. That would be a strong point that we would really want you to elaborate on. But Alvin, you have been listening. Do you want to chime in now as we are?
Yeah, well, I think Cara made a very good point there when she says that some persons have remained silent who should have come forward and speak on the process, and while you have others just making loud noise, which is true. I listened to most of the consultations, and there were folks there making some real erroneous statement as it relates to the whole process. And in some cases, I would say the Attorney General didn't start to provide clarity on the matter. And what is even more disturbing is the fact that the Attorney General is the Attorney General for the people. It's like the Attorney General of the United States. He's not the Attorney General for the Biden government. He's the Attorney General for the US. So he's not the Attorney General for the Dominica Labour Party. And most times when he speaks, it comes across as he's so enwrapped with the political party, the Dominica Labour Party, and not necessarily coming across as the Attorney General for the country, and to speak to the issues as he sees it affect the people of Dominica. So that was a little disappointing. But like I said in my opening comments, I think we're at a point now where I would hope that there is still a chance for other persons to speak on the issues. For example, when they had the forum for the attorneys, and I myself was a little disappointed in terms of the turnout. I mean, we know Dominica is one of the islands in the region that have a pretty decent population of attorneys. And if I recall, you had the president of the bar, Miss Knight, DJ, who spoke. And then you had the registrar, I think, spoke. And some other young lady, I don't recall, and Gilden. And of course, Tony. But, one would have expected, especially coming from the more senior attorneys, some kind of contribution that would be able to direct and advise and educate Dominicans in terms of what are some of those provisions in the legislation. That's right down the alley. That's law. That's right down the alley. That's your cup of tea. And we as citizens expect them to provide us with some clarity. Obviously, you'll expect one might have different interpretation. One lawyer might interpret this way, another lawyer might present it that way. But at the end of the day, we expect them to come forward. So it is my hope that even before this matter is presented for final approval in Parliament, that there is still a chance for presentation to be made either directly to the Commission or, as has been requested, to the CABSEC, to reflect what a true legislation should look like as it relates to electoral reform for the people.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Alvin. Kara, anything Alvin said that you want to just chime in on, or you want to go straight into, because I know the point you made about the Byron's writings, really national ID versus the voters ID.
Okay, well, we can go straight into that issue.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Right. Okay, so basically, the current law states that you are entitled to vote, except in certain circumstances. That is, once you're registered, you're entitled to vote, except in certain circumstances. And one such circumstance is if you have remained out of Dominica, you've been absent from Dominica for a period of 5 years. Now, this section of the law has been problematic because many persons are of the opinion that it is wrong for a certain group of people who reside outside of Dominica to simply come visit Dominica every time an election is called to vote and then return to their country. Now, I am one of those who believe that it is absolutely wrong to accept payments for voting. This situation we have in Dominica where persons who reside overseas are given free transportation, airplane tickets, etc., spending money in order for them to return home to vote in a particular way. You know, I believe that is absolutely wrong. And Sir Byron actually in phase 2, in his phase 2 report, cited a passage from Halsbury Laws of England, where it is expressly stated that this kind of transaction or these kind of activities constitute bribery. So his position is also that it is wrong to import voters because you believe that they will vote for you, whether there's an express statement or whether it is implied.
Yeah.
If it is that you are going to be importing voters, you do not go through a list and select those you believe are aligned to you. So, you know, there are many reasons for that position, and I'll just, you know, pause a bit to just highlight some of those issues.
Yeah, Kara, just before you highlight some of these issues, though, I just want us to just sort of go back to the point that you raised, because a lot of Dominicans, those who support the Labour Party, I must add, in terms of a pushback or counter argument of what even Dennis Byron said in the report as it pertains to treating. They are saying that, for example, in our local customary ways in Dominica, someone may be voting in Dalis but living in Roseau, and the party that they support through the agents normally would, you know, make a bus available or give them a ride or whatever it is, or facilitate them to get to Dalis or get to their voting station. And they equate that to the same situation like the paying of tickets to come home to vote. How would you respond to that?
I would say that they're talking about apples and oranges, because the cost of transportation in Dominica is very minor. I mean, you're talking about what, $5 from Salisbury to Roseau, you know, $10 depending on where you live. Mm-hmm. So you cannot compare providing someone with transportation internally in Dominica with providing someone with an airplane ticket. You know, when you look at the cost of an airplane ticket, you're talking about hundreds of dollars, depending on where you are, thousands of dollars. And we must be concerned about the amount of money that is being spent on transporting voters from overseas to Dominica. So these are two completely different things. And they really, honestly, I mean, if someone is being honest and truthful. These two things cannot be logically compared.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, but I just wanted to hear your own thoughts because, these are some of the utterances way on the ground, especially from the people who support the incumbent.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So Lovely, some of the reasons why I'm against the importation of voters by any particular party, so that those persons would vote for them, are one, when you have this kind of situation or these activities taking place, then the party which is able to raise the most money would ultimately win the election. When winning an election depends on money, then political parties will, do anything in order to raise more money than the other. They might end up getting financing from, some person who does not have the best interests of the Dominica at heart. And, when they get into office, the question is, are they going to repay that contribution with favors? And, that is very dangerous for Dominica. It affects all of us. We may not see it directly, but indirectly, when governments give preferential treatments to a foreign contributor or some criminal contributor, it is the citizens of Dominica who will ultimately suffer. We are the ones who have to pay the price. Additionally, I believe that these persons who live outside of Dominica are not sufficiently familiar with the issues that we face on the ground. They are not the ones going to the hospitals and being told that, oh, we do not have this medication, or we don't have a particular machine that is needed to run certain tests. They are not the ones who are forced to travel overseas in order to get an education. So seeing that we are the Dominicans who actually reside in Dominica are the ones who have to drive on the feeder roads to the farm or have their vehicles damaged because of the lack of road maintenance. I believe those are the persons who really should have the final say in terms of, or the louder voice in terms of, which government is elected or which group of persons from the next government. In Dominica, we have a particular situation, which is probably different from other countries most countries in the world, where we have an extremely high number of persons, Dominicans, living outside of Dominica. I believe that, the number of Dominicans living outside might be more than those living on the ground in Dominica when you look at the statistics. So in a situation like that, you have to be very careful to protect your population, and you cannot allow persons who reside outside of Dominica to simply every 5 years come down and impose a government on those who reside inside of Dominica. That is absolutely wrong. Another aspect or another factor we have to look at is the CBI citizens. Now, I have made the point before, and I will make it again because I think this is an extremely important point. CBI citizens have equal rights as any other Dominican citizen, and that includes the right to vote. Now, when I made the points at the consultation in Goodwill, I think it was a Mr. Benoit who stood up and tried to make some to counteract that point, and to point out that CBI citizens must be above the age of 18 to vote, and they must reside in Dominica for at least 3 months in order to vote. That is not in dispute. It is not in dispute. And, you know, the fact is that you have a group of people who were not born in Dominica, who purchased their citizenship, and those persons have equal rights to vote as Dominican citizens. So if it is that they are above the age of 18 and they have resided here for a period of 3 years, then they can vote. Sorry, a period of 3 months, not 3 years, 3 months. Then they can vote just as any other Dominican citizen. Now, when you look at the number of citizenships that have been sold, and you compare that figure to our voting population, right? In terms of the number of voters who actually turn out on polling day, then you would realize that we are in serious, serious problems in Dominica. The CBI population, from what I understand, the statistics that I've looked at, it's in the region of 40,000. The number of electors who turned out on polling day in Dominica at the 2019 elections was in the region of 40,000. And I am certain that I do not believe it's possible for all 40,000 Dominicans in such a deeply divided and polarized society to vote for one political party. So I foresee a real problem in Dominica in the future, where if this electoral reform process isn't handled properly, and if we continue selling citizenship at the rates at which we are currently selling citizenship, then we, the indigenous population, the local population, the people, the Dominicans who were born here and who turn up to vote on polling day, we might very well find ourselves outnumbered by CBI citizens. People who, yes, they purchase their citizenship, but, you know, we do not know whether these people's allegiance is truly to Dominica, because it's something that they simply purchase. It's just an asset for them. You know, we do not know that they love Dominica in the way that you and I, who grew up running in the streets of Dominica, who have friends, family, relatives, you know, regardless of color, because I have friends, family, relatives who support, you know, probably every political party in Dominica.
Yes.
So I think we must not lose sight of the fact that we are Dominicans, regardless of our political opinion. And there is such a thing as persons who may not have their allegiance to Dominica, persons who may be, they may be in favor of a foreign power, you know, because we should not be naive. We have to always be cognizant of our history in Dominica, our history in the Caribbean. Prior to gaining independence, we were a colony of England. We're a colony of England, and as a colony, we did not receive the kind of attention and care and development that English people received in England. So when you compare the state of development in Dominica and in the Caribbean to that in England, then you would see that when you're ruled by a foreign power or foreigners, then I mean, you receive what is at the bottom of the barrel. You receive the crumbs, the peanuts.
Yes.
You know, so I do not want us to return to that situation where we are being ruled by foreign powers. And, you know, I see some persons might say that, I heard one person, Mr. Benoit, say it's xenophobic, but that is not being xenophobic. It is being realistic. It's being wise. It's being able to foresee a problem in the future and not be reckless with your future and with the future of your people. You know, we cannot be reckless and careless with Dominica. This is all that we have. You know, when we look at countries like Haiti and we look at what is happening with the Haitians, risking their lives, going out on days in order to make it to America or to a neighboring Caribbean islands. is this really what we want for Dominica? Do we want to just completely turn Dominica over to people, foreigners who, may not have the best interests of us Dominicans at heart? And then where do we go? I think there's a song that says, who can run will run, but the thing is that, yes, some people may be young, they may be able to make it elsewhere and succeed and thrive elsewhere. But what about those who cannot run? What about the elderly people, the very young children? What about them, those who cannot run? What is going to happen to them? So, there are all of these social, political issues that we have to consider in this question of electoral reform. Because, I see members of some persons are saying, oh, I know this person. I have a brother who sends barrels to Dominica and he visits every year. I mean, yes, you have a brother who does that, but does it mean that, as a payment for the barrel, you should simply put your future, the future of Dominica at risk? Is it worth it? And if someone is doing something out of the goodness of their hearts, then do it out of the goodness of your hearts. Do not try to, do not try to destroy our democracy because of it, because of that. So, these are my views on the issue of the residency requirement. I am totally in agreement with the 90 days rule. If it is that you want to vote, then you should at least be in Dominica, present in Dominica for 90 days during a period of 5 years. If you are someone who visits Dominica for 90 days during a period of 5 years and you're a member of the diaspora, then you should not have any difficulty with this rule, because you would be entitled to remain on the register. But it is really, that rule is really targeted at those who cannot, those who simply cannot afford perhaps to get a ticket. And so, every election time they wait on the government or the political party, whichever political party, to give them a ticket so that they could come down to vote.
Yeah. Cara, you are going pretty well here, I must say, in terms of your deliveries thus far. Let me ask you though, seeing that we're on the point of the CBI citizens, those who purchase their citizenship, what would be your view if asked to recommend something as a way forward, how we deal with these people in particular as it pertains to the whole reform agenda we are pursuing?
Well, my view is that you have to be very careful when dealing with this CBI issue, because we as Dominicans have, well, I can't say we have all allowed, but we have seen and we are aware of the fact that our government has over the past years sold citizenship to foreigners. And, the government and the CBI agents have taken monies from these foreigners. So if it is that you sell something to someone, then you simply, you owe them something. You simply cannot treat these people badly. You cannot simply revoke citizenship, etc. So I believe that we have to be very careful in order to be fair to the people who have purchased citizenship, and also in order to be fair to Dominicans. Yes. Now, I believe that...
Yes.
Sorry.
I was telling you, St. Kitts, for example, have taken a position that is a policy position that, and that is law in terms of their electoral practices. These CBI citizens, they are not allowed to participate in the St. Kitts and Nevis people general election. Would you go that far in terms of your own opinion for us in Dominica?
Well, Loftus, what I think would be a preferable position to take is to really put a limit on the amount of citizenship that we are selling. You know, you cannot have a country with a population of just about 70,000 people selling more than 40,000 citizenship. You simply cannot do that, because while it is true that you can try to, you know, restrict what these citizens can do, the fact is that this group of people they have access to the court. They can challenge these restrictions to the courts, in the court, because when you sold citizenship, you did not tell them that they were going to be half a citizen or quarter a citizen. You sold citizenship to them. So they are of the opinion that they have equal rights like any other citizen. And that is problematic. So I think now is the time, especially with what is happening in the UK, for the government to look at other sources of income, to diversify, in the sense that, you know, we're depending too much on CBI income. This is not, I have always said that this is not, how you got it? Like, you know, you have renewable resources or renewable energy, and then you have things which are finite. You really, I mean, it makes no sense to have a population of 70,000 and you're on 40,000 and climbing. This is wrong. And I see that with the international airport, for example, they are depending solely on citizenship in order to fund this. How much citizenship are you going to sell in order to fund an international airport? You know, so we Dominicans, we have cause, we have reasons to be very alarmed at the way the program is being handled. There is no cap, there's no limit on the number of citizenship that the government of the day can sell. And it is going to run us into serious problems if it is that this isn't addressed.
Yeah. Just before, yes, Alvin have his hand up. Alvin, go right ahead. And then
I agree with Cara entirely. I think the point that she raised about citizenship is a matter that has to be seriously addressed and looked into. It's not something that we should just gloss over. Having said that, I don't know if Clara might be able to speak to our Constitution in section 33(2)(a) makes reference to the fact that every Commonwealth citizen, meaning that a citizen of the Commonwealth can vote in Dominica once they meet certain requirements. Now, in St. Lucia has in their law, in their Election Act, where it says that a Commonwealth citizen who has resided continuously in St. Lucia for not less than 7 years immediately preceding the qualifying date as one of the requirements to be registered and to be able to vote. I think Grenada and Antigua also have 1 year. I believe in our current legislation, Dominica also have 12 months. So my thing as an immediate, in addition to the concerns that Cara just pointed out, which is true, is to whether we can have in the legislation something similar to what St. Lucia have there for the Commonwealth citizens. Because St. Lucia is saying that you must reside for at least 7 years to be registered and to consider to vote as a Commonwealth citizen. And even right here, for example, in I don't know if that would require a constitutional amendment or the act would suffice, but even in the United States, someone who becomes a naturalized citizen cannot hold the office of President of the United States. They can go for any other office, but not the office of the president. So it would seem to me as a start would be to say, well, hey, like Cara said, these people maybe have no allegiance to the country. In order for you to qualify, you must do at least a certain minimum period, 5 years, 7 years, whatever that is, in addition to the other requirements that we would want to put into the act. But again, as I said, I'm not sure, as she rightly pointed out, to what extent one might say, well, hey, I'm a citizen now, so by you stipulating that, you are contravening my constitutional right as contained in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Cara,
all right, folks. Yes. All right, folks, thank you, Alvin, very much for your points here, Riz here. Folks, it is 10 minutes to the hour of 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, we're going to open up the lines just in case you want to get your voice in the conversation as well. So please take note, in the next 10 minutes thereabout, we're going to open up those lines. As we get back to the conversation here with lawyer Kara Shillingford. Kara, you were making a point a while ago, which we
Could she make a brief comment, what I raised, if she has a comment on it at all?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes. So Section 33(2) of the Constitution specifically and expressly says that these Commonwealth citizens can vote subject to such requirements as to domicile or residence as Parliament may prescribe. Now, under the old laws, or the current laws rather, there's a requirement for the person to reside in Dominica for at least 12 months, that is 1 year. And I see in the draft legislation, the 12 months requirement remains. So there is a residency requirement for 12 months for Commonwealth citizens. But I see the point that you are making, and the question is whether it should be increased. And yes, I believe that it should be increased. So as to protect the indigenous population, and by indigenous population, I'm not referring to the Kalinagos, but all of us who were born here, because we are small and we are somewhat endangered. So we're in need of protection. So yes, I support your suggestion that it should be increased.
And that is something that could apply to the CBI citizens.
Yes, that can apply to the CBI citizens. But that is, the CBI citizens, though, would fall on the, the CBI citizens would fall on the citizens of Dominica. So if you're going to put a requirement that currently it's 3 months, you must have resided in a particular polling station or in Dominica for 3 months. So, it's the 3 months that would apply to them. Okay. Because, there's nothing that permits different classes of citizen currently in our laws. And under the Constitution does not recognize different classes of citizens. And the CBI program developed based on regulations, not even an act of parliament, which is why there are so many problems surrounding it. But I see that we're going to open up our lines. So I don't know if I could touch on just 1 or 2 areas which, have not been in the center of the discussion so far during the consultation.
Sure, you can go right ahead. It's just that you were making a point a while ago, read Byron's writings, the voter ID cards versus the national ID card. I just wanted to touch on that before we sort of move further. What he was recommending in terms of the national ID versus the voter's ID.
Okay, sure. So the recommendation, which has jumped to it, he's recommending the national ID card. And that's at page 25 of the phase 1 report.
Yes.
So basically he says, because I do not want to misquote him, but he says that so I'm reading directly from page 25. The Registration of Electors Amendment Bill 2019 was tabled in Parliament but not passed, had proposed a national identification card. Inasmuch as the 2019 bill reflects government policy, the legislation I have proposed reflects in the main the provisions of that bill relating to a national ID card. However, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the following concerns. Then his first concern. By definition, a national ID card should be accessible by all nationals. A card issued as part of the voter registration process will not be available to everyone. For example, a person who does not apply for registration as a voter, whether because he or she is not of voting age or for any other reason, would not be issued the card. This means that the non-registered segment of the population would be excluded from the national ID system. Consequently, the government would have to enact separate legislation to fill that gap. So basically he's making the point that a national ID card should be, by its definition, available to all nationals, but a voter ID card should be available only to eligible voters. So, if it is that you're talking about democracy and ensuring that only eligible voters are permitted to vote, then, it's really a voter ID card that you need. Now, then he makes the point that the introduction of a national ID card would require additional measures for the purpose of identification. Accessing the biometric information on the card will require special equipment. And then he makes a number of other points concerning the questions or possible issues relating to the national ID card. But one of the points that he raised, and I just want to highlight it, is the question of whether the biometric data that is included as part of the voter ID card or the national ID card, whether that should simply involve facial ID, facial recognition, or should it include fingerprinting? And what struck me was what the government's position on this. Let me see. Let me just see if I can read directly. So he says, during my consultations with the government, they also supported the use of biometric data to strengthen the process of personal identification, but proposed that the use of facial recognition was sufficient and that to include the requirement of fingerprinting might generate pushback, especially from those segments of the community which associated the taking of fingerprints with criminal investigation. So that part of it struck me because, I mean, if it is that you are living in a society that is supposed to, be against crime and, it's supposed to be in support of law and peace, etc., security, then fingerprinting, allowing your fingerprinting information to be part of the voter identification card system, I don't think that should be an issue. We as Caribbean people, whenever we travel to the US or we apply for a visa, we have to be fingerprinted. So I do not believe that there's any association between fingerprinting and criminal investigations that would warrant the government saying that only facial identification software should be used, because fingerprinting is used for a number of things, and it's not just as part of the criminal process. When you travel, if you travel to the US, you must be fingerprinted. Now, Lofty, if I may just move on to another point, though. I see that the report recommended the closure of registration on the day the writ of election is issued. Yes. And that is at I think page 30 of the report. Sir Byron stated, the commission supported the view that in order to resolve this problem, and that is the problem of people rushing to register on the last day, the register of electors must be closed to amendment on the day the writ for holding an election is issued. However, in the interest of fair play, matters already pending on that day may be addressed after polling day. New legislative provisions will be introduced to give effect to the facts that decision, Okay, yes. So that is what is in the report. I have some concerns about that. I remember in the 2019 elections, within the deadline or the time frame stipulated in the legislation for filing claims and objections, a number of objections were filed. and those objections were not dealt with prior to the election. Now, if we may just step back a little, so that everyone could understand the importance of this claim and objection procedure. The fact is that the register is what is used on polling day to determine whether a person is entitled to vote, whether a person should be given a ballot paper. If your name is on the register, and under the new regime, if it is that you have your voter ID card or national ID card, then you will be given a ballot in order to vote. Now, the mechanism in the legislation that will be used, or one of the mechanisms, I should say, because other mechanisms were proposed. One of the mechanisms is the procedure for filing claims and objections to names on the list. So if it is, I see the name of a person who I know died 2 years ago on the list, then I can file an objection. If it is, I see the name of someone who I know has been outside of Dominica for more than 5 years, I can file my objection. Now, this is how the list remains valid, and this is how we preserve democracy. If it is that in this report and in the draft legislation, you're saying that the commission would have the power, or you're recognizing that the commission can simply deal with some of the pending matters after the election, then there's a problem. There's a problem. That is basically making the claims and objection procedure useless.
Sure,
so I think that, rather than making that statement in the report, it should be mandatory for all claims and objection to be determined prior to polling day, by a particular date. So, these are some of my concerns concerning the report. And, this is one of the issues which we really have not been speaking about. I don't think it was highlighted during the consultation process.
Gara, plenty food for thought. Alvin, you agree? We have to take that break now.
Yeah, I think and Lofty, that is as Kara said, and you, I'm sure, have articulated that is that's the problem that we have as we move forward. I mean, even on the question of the fingerprint that she raised, and I heard the minister Vince Henderson at one of the consultations opposing the question of the fingerprint, and he was so disingenuous when he referenced his two constituencies that he represented, Granby and St. Joseph, and saying he represents those two constituencies and kind of implying that those persons would not want to have their fingerprint taken. And like Kara said, I mean, that is something we do. We travel, we go to the state, we take a fingerprint. So it seems to me, if you have a government or a party not wanting persons to take their fingerprint, that's troubling. It means that it's either you associate with folks who do not want to have their fingerprint, you're associated with persons who are against the law, don't observe the law, hence the reason that you don't want your fingerprint taken. And that is very troubling.
So, Alvin, could we say that the government is looking down the road?
Well, I guess we can say that, but that road is a dangerous road, Lofty, because once you said, if you're above the fray and you have no problem, so sure, go ahead and take my fingerprint. But once you start giving that pushback, then that's a problem. And then, of course, she raised the question about the writ and the list. This is one of the areas that the CCJ reinforced in their, one might say, comments or whatever term you want to refer to it. But they made the point that the list, the electors list, constitute the central part of an election. Because as Kara said, that is where your name, once registered, get on that list. And once your name is on that list, you are entitled to vote. Okay? And if the list itself is corrupt, if the list is not a good list, if the list has names that should not be there in the first place, then we have a problem. And as I pointed out on this program before, Dominica is the only island throughout the region, beyond the OECS, in CARICOM, where their voters list is more than the population. So that is a huge issue. So I think she's right. That's something that has to be looked at in the legislation. And it is my hope that some of those concerns can still be raised and presented before the commission, because again, as we know, Section 56 of the Constitution requires the commission to have its fingerprint on anything in terms of draft legislation before it goes to Parliament.
True. Solid point so far. Folks, it is 10 minutes. Yes, just about 10 minutes past hour of 7 o'clock. And that is the time we will take a break now to give at least Kara's voice a little break and then open up the lines, as it were, for those of you in the listening and viewing audience to contribute to the conversation. So please make very good use of that time. We're going to play a track now from Brother Abel John Baptist, better known in the Calypso arena, Calypso world as Checo. He penned a song, he sang a song, he put together a song specifically for the topic we're discussing tonight about electoral reform. Folks, take a listen. We'll be right back in just a bit. Brother Checo, thank you very much indeed.
Dominicans, Dominicans, we need our electoral reform. Tell Simbot, call the cabinet, our money can just go to waste like that. Dominicans pay their money. You should perform your duty. How long before we get our reform? We have some elections in the interest of one man. But like Egypt, the people need freedom. If you cannot deliver, then give us back our dollars, sir. Stay in your lane. We know you know our country, love to spend big money, sir. Stay in your lane. The people, frustrated and tired, Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before the fall house break. The people know of Full Wash Brigade, May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what he paid,
if you don't give us our reform, Kai Pool Kwaze, Brother Checo said. Huh?
Dominicans, Dominicans, we need to fight for what we believe. Enough talking, time for action. We need reform, we need our voters card. The people pressurizing, yes, they're ready for action. How long before we get our reform? If we vote without voters ID, could vote for a dead family. And before ballot don't count, landslide victory. Re-election legacy concerns everybody, sir. Stay in your lane. We hear you write a report to Annie Valdez, boy. Stay in your lane. The people frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before reform we take. The people know of Full Wash Brigade, May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what we pay, Kai Pool Kwaze.
If you don't deliver for what we pay, Kai Pool Kwazi, Dominicans will get the third verse. And when we end the program, let's get back to the live panel again. We want to thank our brother Cheku for delivering this very timely and important song, Re-Electoral Reform. Kara, we are back with you. You raised some salient points already. As we are now on the verge of, the second hour into the second hour, any more points that you'd want to drive home as we continue on?
Okay, Lofty, I just want to highlight that there are certain positions taken by Sir Byron in the draft legislation, which are commendable. And some of these include the section of the House of Assembly Elections Act that speak to equal access to state-owned media. That is in line with the decisions taken or the position taken by the courts as it relates to, I think, the 2019 litigation where the courts, the High Court and the Court of Appeal both stated that all political parties should have equal access to state-owned media. The efforts made at campaign financing legislation in order to, put it in black and white that you cannot receive campaign financing from certain persons, including persons involved in criminal activities, certain foreign powers, etc. These are commendable. So yes, there are recommendations which certainly will go a long way towards strengthening our democracy in Dominica.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Alvin, any further thoughts from you as we're moving on? Thank you, Carol.
No, I think if I may go back for a little while to the electors list, because that's also a burning issue. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, this is one of the number one issue as it relates in the reform exercise. One may call it the sanitization of the list or ensuring that the list is done properly. Voters identification card, as Cara mentioned, the whole question of treating and bribing to make sure the legislation reflects appropriately what's considered treating and bribing. Again, if I may reference, it was the Minister Vince Henderson who said, well, if the Labour Party gives somebody a pay for their trip from New York to Dominica to vote, is the same like giving them a ride. And of course, we clearly heard from Cara tonight that that's like apples and oranges. So that's an issue. And of course, we have the burning issue of the diasporans vote, but that also is linked with the whole question of the list and not necessarily the right to vote, because if, as was pointed out, and I think that point has to be made as well, if you meet all of the requirements, even under the existing law, the existing electors regulations that we have, whereby you can just come for 1 day within that 5-year period. Right now, Sir Byron is proposing 90 or 50 days. But what we have now, even if you come for 1 day within that 5-year period, you are able to vote, or rather your name would remain on the list, okay? And you meet the other requirements. So if you are in the diaspora and you want to vote and you meet the requirements, which if we change to the 90 days, and you meet the requirements under the legislation, and you decide to pay your way and come down, you're here for the election and you want to come and vote, and you meet those requirements, then so be it. Pay, buy your ticket, come down to vote. No one has an issue with that. And also the question of, I hear some people making the issue of if their name is removed. There's nothing that says that if your name is removed, you remain permanently out of the list. If, say, for example, you stay beyond the 5 years, and even with the 90 days that we have now, say, for example, you're out 6 years or 7 years, and finally you decide to come back to Dominica, to migrate back to Dominica to live, then all you do, you go and register. You meet the requirements, you're staying in Kinfield, Marigot, Black Plain, wherever. You go, you register because you're a citizen, your name is back on the list, and you're able to vote at the next election. What's the issue? I don't see the issue. So clearly, when you hear all this hue and cry coming from some of the folks in the diaspora that don't take out the name or it's a sinister motive. It's a motive that they're depending on a party or a government in office to buy tickets and to pay their way to come down to vote, which is against the core of our democracy. That cannot be right.
True. Yeah.
Lofty,
yes. No problem.
sorry.
Go ahead.
If Alvin is finished, if I may just make an additional point.
Sure. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. As it relates to the issue of the diaspora, which Alvin was just, as he was going over that issue, something came to mind, which is a point I made at the consultation. I am not against members of the diaspora voting. I'm not against that. They are Dominican citizens. If it is that they can, they are in Dominica, present in Dominica during the period of 90 days, over a period of 5 years, as recommended or as suggested by Sir Byron, then fine, allow them to vote in the constituency where they reside. However, for those persons who cannot be present in Dominica for a period of 90 days during an aggregate, during a 5-year span, I believe that the solution is to create a constituency for members of the diaspora. Yes, this may require certain changes to our constitution, and that is subject to legal opinion, because I reviewed the constitution prior to coming on this program, and the constitution does not spell out that there should be 21 constituency in Dominica. As a matter of fact, the constitution states that there should be an electoral boundaries commission, and that commission, as Sir Dennis Byron stated in his report, phase 2 of his report, that commission has not been functioning as it should under the constitution. I believe that is towards the end of the phase 2 report. The constitution says that this commission is supposed to prepare a report and recommendations as it relates to boundaries, the number of boundaries, where those boundaries should fall in Dominica between every 2 to 5 years. Every 2 to 5 years, this report should be prepared, tabled in Parliament, etc. And Sir Byron stated that over the past years, no such report has been tabled in Parliament. So it appears that, I do not know who the members of this commission are. I don't know whether the commission, the Boundaries Commission, is functioning in Dominica. But in other countries like St. Kitts, I know that their Boundaries Commission has been active over the past years. So Sir Byron also included in his report a table that shows the disparity in population, among between the 21 constituencies, with the Corleo constituency being the smallest, I think less than 1,000. And then you have constituencies like Roseau South being in the region of 3,000 and so on. So he has highlighted an issue. He said that this was outside of the scope of his report, because his focus really was on the registering process, the voting process. But if we're going to fix it, then we should fix the problem completely. We should not, say we're doing electoral reform and, leave loopholes. The issue of members of the diaspora voting and, being handed airplane tickets and, boat tickets in order to come home to vote, that is a pressing concern. And, in order to have an equal playing field so that any political party that is contesting an election would not feel the need to go and raise millions of dollars in order to bring home import voters. In order to have that equal playing field, I believe the solution would be simply create a constituency for members of the diaspora who cannot return home for, during that 90-day period. They will be assigned one constituency, and therefore the impact that they have on the outcome of the election wouldn't be so drastic. Now, if it is that you don't do this, then unfortunately, I foresee that this problem of importing voters most likely will continue, because people, yes, there are laws in place. And yes, Sir Byron said that, he quoted from Hasbury and said that it is treating, but there are always people who believe that they are above the law, and people who, they will break the law. So, I'm concerned about the amount of money which we spend on elections in Dominica, because, chartering flights, boats, these things are expensive. Having, 3-4 international artists or regional artists outside of Dominica come in to perform at free concerts where you pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is expensive. And when you look at the peanuts that our local entertainers are getting compared to the millions being spent on, these foreign artists, it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. When you look at our hospital, that, very often you hear that they don't have the medication that people require. When you go to the hospital, they will give you a prescription. Most of the times they give you a prescription, and you have to get your family, your friends to go to Dolly's Pharmacy in order to get the medication. People who reside in the US or in the UK, when you go to the hospital, you sign off on certain forms and they treat you. They give you the medication that you need, and then you get a bill at the end of the day. Here, if it is that you cannot afford the medication, the screws, the plates, that you need in order to recover, in order to survive, then, you might end up being just another fatality. So in a country where we are not rich, we certainly are not rich. We are by majority poor people. We are struggling. There are many Dominicans who are living from hand to mouth. People who owe months' rent, who don't know where they're going to get money to feed their children, to pay for education, books, and so on. In a country like that, where you're not swimming in money and cash, we really should not be spending so much on elections. I would not like to see a situation where, a political party in the future figure that, because of this loophole in our electoral laws, we are forced to bring in voters as well. And so you have multiple political parties trying to import voters, and it's simply a question of who can raise the most money, who can import the most people. Because, if we leave the system as it is, that might very well be how things end up.
Yeah, true. Cara, just to strengthen a bit the point that you made there, really, the idea, noble idea that is, of the virtual constituencies, so that those persons living outside of Dominica really and truly wanted to exercise their franchise in terms of their right to vote, but they couldn't come home, or they cannot come home, then, these virtual constituencies will afford them that opportunity to be part and parcel of the electoral process. And as you said, in that way, they will not be impacting too much, as it will, on the outcome, but still they will have a say as to what, goes on there. I heard Roosevelt Skerrit shut that down as if, well, you were saying something out of the ordinary. And it really dawned on me that I'm quoting now Brother Tiani Behanzin. Tiani said at some function, or I think private conversation, that all the way back in 2000, Rosie Douglas, deceased, may his soul rest in peace, brought up that point or something around that situation to cater for Dominicans living overseas so that they could exercise that right. And here it is, Roosevelt's carrot in 2023, having taken over, as it were, from Rosie Douglas, is so far from the idea and ideals of this brother. And in terms of the whole giving Dominicans a chance to exercise that right. And it really baffles me as to just why would this guy be shooting down that idea, not even acknowledging the fact that a predecessor of his, Rosie Douglas, mentioned that in terms of an idea that he had to, sort of see to fruition if he had given that opportunity. So I just find that it is kind of far-fetched, and Roosevelt's carriage shooting down that idea today, then it leaves a lot to ponder on as to just why that and these little lame excuses that he gave about fixing potholes and this and that, and pure foolish talk, if you ask me. It leaves a lot to wonder as to just why would he not consider having these virtual constituencies unopposed to what is happening in big broad daylight. We saw in 2019, the Melville airport was lit, as it were, with planes waiting to take back people to their necessary territories, and they came and participated in our electoral process, in our elections. And so by shooting that down, I am just suggesting it is maybe a way that is trying to continue that legacy, as it were, of manipulating the electoral process. These are just my thoughts. Yes, Alvin.
Yeah, let me, no, I agree with you. And as I've said before, if you have a genuine person from the diaspora who wants to vote and meet the requirement, then they can come down and vote. There's no problem with that. I mean, as Cara said, I mean, as I say, who in the kitchen fills the heat? I mean, the people on the ground, there's sufficient Dominicans on the ground that can exercise their franchise to vote. And they're the ones that are more directly affected by what's taking place in Dominica, not those of us who are all the way far out. That is not to say that we don't have a vested interest in what's happening back home. But even when I hear the question being raised of this and in burial, I mean, that to my mind is so disrespectful. To want to compare your vote to a barrel, that's the extent to which we have come. And you hear people from the diaspora saying, well, I send barrel and I send that to be able to vote. That doesn't make no sense. But we have a lot of comments on the feed, but there's a question, two questions actually, I might want to pose to Cara from one of the persons, Marshall Lawrence.
Yes, Alvin, before you pose the question, may I just respond to what Lofty said?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So Lofty, you said that he shot down the idea. What I would say is he tried to shoot down the idea, but I think that the idea speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And, the fact that the late Rosie Douglas also shared the same opinion, that I am now making public, that is something for labor rights to consider, because, they are the ones who, they are more familiar with Rosie, what his values were, etc. So that is food for thought for them. But I think that the virtual constituency, or the constituency for members of the diaspora,
Yeah.
that is the solution to the problem that we currently face. Because, as I said, in the absence of that, then you're going to have a situation continue where whoever has the most money and can import the most voters will win the election. And this is going to be a even bigger problem as the rate of migration increases, and it is ever increasing in Dominica for whatever reason. And as you have the CBI population increasing. We're selling citizenship in countries like China. The population of China is in the region of billions. The Chinese government is perhaps 1 billion times richer than the government of Dominica. I mean, they're the ones we're getting loans and grants and assistance from. So, you know, they have the money, they have the population. You know, our prime minister should be thinking not about his, you know, re-election legacy, not about past campaign strategies that have worked for the Labour Party, but rather he should be thinking about us, Dominicans, all of us, our children, our grandchildren, the future population. You know, are we really going to make Dominica so vulnerable that we may return to a position where we are dominated by foreign forces? You know, we may return to, I mean, things could get really ugly. Slavery happened. Yes, it was hundreds of years ago, but circumstances like slavery can return. We see what is happening with Russia and Ukraine. These things are not far-fetched. You know, so we really have to be careful when we shoot down ideas, because these ideas are good ideas. Well, this is a good idea, which you know, it aims to create a level playing field. It would not favor any one political party. It would ensure that the members of the diaspora are included, their voices are heard, but at the same time, you know, there's an equal playing field. Political parties don't have to compete to raise funds and bring in voters, you know, because, I mean, that's not what we want. It's not ideal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the two questions I have there is for the guests. Is it a normal procedure that when the draft bill is sent to the electoral office, the commission has to take it back to the masses for further consultation before it goes to parliament? And what may be the outcome if this happens?
Okay, so no, the procedure that was adopted here isn't a normal procedure in the sense that, you know, usually the sitting government would not retain a third party in order to, you know, completely revise the legislation and make those recommendations. Usually the process would be controlled by the Electoral Commission. Nonetheless, we are where we are. I believe, or my understanding is that the outcome of these consultations could determine whether further amendments are made to the bill, the draft bill, before it is presented to Parliament. So these bills have not been tabled as yet. So, you know, if further amendments are made, if it is that the commission or Sir Byron, etc., you know, if they listen to our concerns, then, and they agree that there are certain loopholes or things that need to be fixed, then they can make amendments to the proposed legislation, and it can be tabled in Parliament in a format or with wording that is aimed at protecting all Dominicans, protecting our democracy, and, you know, would benefit us and our future generation.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Carol. And just to add, as I may have referred to earlier, Section 51 of the Constitution is quite clear as it relates to that.
You have a next question, Alvin, from the...
No, I was just reinforcing what she was saying.
Okay, cool. Okay.
To say that once what we have now goes to the commission vets it and they give agreement to it, then that goes back to the executive, who in turn now prepares the legislative framework, prepares what needs to be presented to Parliament in the form of a legislation that meets the aspirations of the people. But that was the only one I saw so far. I don't know if you saw any others.
Yeah. Well, I have a question of my own, and I would really like to have Cara ventilate on it before we end the program tonight. Cara, we have been hearing about these reforms talk from time immemorial. as I said from the beginning. In your mind, Kara, in your mind, can you tell us what would be your thoughts on the must-haves or the imperatives, the baseline, the cutoff point, the boundary line, as it were, some of the things that must be there before another election is called in Dominica? Just your thoughts on that. At least to give the Dominican people a point to bargain with.
Okay, so I believe that legislation should be passed and implemented, and that this legislation should include cleansing of the voters list, whether through confirmation of voters as Sir Byron recommended, or through the re-registration process. The need for a voter identification card. I see that the recommendation, or Sir Byron decided to go in line with the government policy as it relates to national ID card. You know, whichever, whether voter ID card, which I believe is the better way to go, or national ID card, in order to have future elections which are free and fair, I believe that one of these should be implemented, and it should be mandatory for persons to have a form of identification if it is that the person shows up on polling day and there's some question as to the person's identity, because these questions have arisen in the past. So access to the media, that is also an important point. That's a must-have in the new in the new legislation. As it relates to the residency requirements, I believe that, except if we have this diaspora constituency created, then absolutely and even if it's created, absolutely we need to have legislation that stipulates the number of days that you must spend in Dominica in order to qualify to remain on the list. So, these are some of the things that I believe are very important if we're going to have free and fair elections.
How would you suggest that we sort of regulate the monies flowing through the elections?
Okay, so I see that
would that be high on your agenda as well?
Yes, I think so. That's certainly very important because we have to be very careful as it relates to the source of funds for campaign financing. And there are certain sources which in the proposed legislation, they're described as illicit sources. There's a requirement to return monies to certain donors, return the contribution within 14 days, I believe. So yes, I just to go through the legislation. It says in section 57, acceptance of certain contributions prohibited. A political party or a candidate shall not knowingly accept contribution during a reporting period from an impermissible contributor. That is to say, A, any foreign or Commonwealth states or any agent of such state, whether directly or indirectly. So, this is in keeping with this idea, which I have been, or the point that I've been making, which is that you have to be careful when you're talking about elections and governance, not to make Dominica vulnerable to foreign powers. So this is repeated again in section 50, the idea, the risk is recognized in section 57(1)(a). Additionally, there's reference made to a public institution as defined in section 2. So that's another illicit source. An entity whose existence or activities are illegal under any law. a person or entity whose identity is not disclosed to the recipients of the contribution, a person or entity who makes the contribution through an intermediary, or a person who or entity which uses a false identity in making contribution. So yes, I believe that the campaign financing regulations, that's a move in the right direction.
Go ahead, Alvin.
Let me ask also, Carol, in terms of the penalties that you have read in the proposed draft legislation for treating and bribery, and I think for, I think the other one had to do with the representative misrepresentation and of information. Do you believe that some of those are sufficient, or when you looked at it, are there areas you believe that could be tightened upon? There's a school of thought, some people feel, well, that if you commit a certain bribe, that you should be disqualified to run for office again for a specific period, stuff like that. What's your take on that?
Okay, the draft legislation, similar to the previous legislation, has a disqualification period. Sorry, disqualification period. That's section 87. It says a person who is convicted of bribery, treating, undue influence, personation, or of aiding, counseling, or procuring the commission of the offense of personation shall, in addition to any other punishment, be incapable during a period of 7 years from the date of conviction of being A, registered as an elector or voting at any election of a member of the House of Assembly, or B, elected as a member of the House of Assembly, or if elected before conviction, of retaining a seat as such member. So there is a requirement in the draft legislation that if you are found guilty of any of these offenses, bribery, treating, then you are incapable for a period of 7 years from voting, and also you must lose your seat if you've been elected, and you are incapable of running for elections for a period of 7 years. I am in agreement with that law.
Okay, let me just follow up very quickly though. One of the problems that we have faced in Dominica, and you might, again, as a legal mind, is the whole question of enforcement. And that applies across the board. So you have a law that speaks to litter, and people litter and nobody enforces it. You have a law that speaks to abuse of minors, nobody enforces it. And even our current electors law, limited as it is, true, we don't have ID cards, but even the whole question of the list, the legislation now tells you that the list should be cleansed over a given period. They may not have the mechanism in place, but the question of enforcement is a major issue. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Alvin. I agree with you 110%. That in Dominica, the issue of enforcing laws is a big problem. But it really depends a lot on the integrity of individuals who hold certain offices. So, there are persons who are entrusted with positions. They're paid by the state in order to perform certain functions, whether in public office or whether, on a commission or part of a board, etc. And, they know what their job is. They receive payments in order to do a particular job. And that payment is usually made by the states out of taxes, which are collected, from Dominicans, people in Dominica. But sadly, for whatever reason, from time to time, people fail to do their jobs. People fail to stand up for what is right, because it is difficult at times to stand up for what is right. It requires that you have strength, you have courage, and that is not something that many people are willing to do. I sit on a particular commission, and I mean, I'm not going to go into that in details, but I think that's public knowledge. And, you know, I was forced to litigate a matter because at the end of the day, you know, I felt that I was being paid by Dominicans out of tax monies from the treasury in order to do a job. And, you know, my conscience simply would not allow me to abdicate my duties, to refuse to do the work that, you know, I'm being paid to do. But it's not everyone who thinks like that. Obviously, when you take these positions, sometimes there's a backlash. And, you know, this isn't just about boards and commissions. Even, for example, in the police force, you know, police officers, sometimes they take all the time, they take an oath to protect and serve, and they're supposed to perform their duties, fight crime, etc. But for whatever reason, from time to time, there are some officers who decide, you know, not to perform those duties, whereas there are other officers who are very hardworking and, you know, do the job properly. So at the end of the day, the issue of enforcement boils down to personal integrity, the personal integrity of the persons who are entrusted with those, the duty to enforce.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Just one thing to add, though, just one thing to add. It's not only those persons who are entrusted with those duties. Yes, they have the bulk of the burden because to whom much is given, much is expected. But also members of the public have a role to play, you know? So I remember, I think it was, can't remember the year, whether 2014 or one of our previous elections, the late Antoine Defoe, Mervyn John Baptist, Edicott said, wow, these are ordinary people, ordinary Dominicans.
That's in 1919 election.
2019, okay,
yes.
Sorry, my memory is a bit off. But yes, these are ordinary men who took a bold and courageous step of filing private criminal complaints of treating against members of a sitting government. And I mean, we all know how that ended up, but these men must be commended for the bold and courageous step. They did what they thought was right, regardless of whatever the consequences may be, right? And so their example show us that there's a role that everyone can play as it relates to enforcing the laws.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Let us now, folks. It is like what, 15 minutes to 8 o'clock. We will be out of here by 8 o'clock. So this is your last chance. If you have to call, please do that now. Don't wait till 5 or 2 minutes to the hour of 8 o'clock to call in. You will have another 13 minutes to go here. Let us get Alvin to some of the comments, especially those with questions on the live feed, so that
it's loaded, but lofty.
At least we can take some from there, and then I'm gonna ask Kara as well. That all important question as we bring the conversation to. Do you really think, Kara, that we will get, as Dominicans, that process to be freer and fairer before another general election in Dominica? But that is the final question for you as we bring the program to. Alvin, any comments you've seen there?
Well, yes, we have Margaret Wallace that just made a comment based on what I guess Kara said, the last comment she made regarding our role and the fact that people should speak up. It comes down to conscience. Additionally, it has to do with your ethics and your morals. And then we have Ezra Winston saying, how do we ensure that these laws be respected? How do we monitor to ensure laws are not broken? And if broken, consequences will be met. So she's asking that question again. If the laws are broken, how do you as an ordinary citizen seek redress and the consequences that should be meted out?
Ezra is a brother, by the way.
Oh, okay. Ezra, yes. And then we have Dory Drygo, who said, great recommendation on the diaspora constituency. I feel that the people on the shores of the Nature Isles are the ones who should vote for their governance, not folks like me who left in the 80s and are citizens of another country. I remain a Dominican. I was born a Dominican. even though my name is on the voters list in Grand Bay, I should not be allowed to vote and let my vote dictate how Dominicans lead. That's coming from Dory Drago.
Alvin,
so
go ahead. Let me just plug in something. Brother David Joseph is writing and telling me in terms of correction, it was in 2014. So, Cara, you're right. 2014 election and not 19. That these brave men, took up the responsibility of taking some matters to court. Yeah. So it was 2014. Thank you, Joseph. Yes, Alvin.
Then, of course, we have Unfiltered Diaspora saying, why is the Electoral Commission so silent in all this matter? Are they all being tainted by affiliation with the Rogue Spirit government? Again, I'm not sure if time will permit us here, but the role of the Electoral Commission is outlined in the Constitution, and what they should and can do. And like I said, the final ball rests in their court in terms of what should be presented to Parliament. So that's their role. So we should all be prepared to keep our eyes and our ears open in terms of what goes to them and what goes back out from them to the executive to be presented to Parliament. And I would strongly suggest folks who still have positions on various aspects of the reform, that those should be submitted either to the commission or to the CAPSEC office. What do you see, Lofty? There are quite a few more.
Yeah, quite a few more, but there's a point that I want to sort of, drive home before we bring the program to a wrap. Roosevelt Skerritt said, Cara, about 3 weeks ago, thereabout, that Byron got paid. Byron brought the recommendations / the reporting. There were the quote-unquote consultations. And he said in a very strong voice and fingers pointing and whatever it is, that come December, that this whole long story back and forth about electoral reform, he going to see to it that is behind us. Cara, how do you see that thing playing out, Cara? That whole situation, because something doesn't seem right where I'm concerned. It is sort of, troubling to me now as a Dominican, that sort of high-handed, iron fist kind of mentality into pushing those strings to Parliament and basically having their eyes have it. How do you see that thing? I don't know if you have a crystal ball, Cara.
I certainly don't, but it is troubling to me as well, because when I look at the rhetoric that is being pushed out there by persons who publicly support the Dominica Labour Party, I'm concerned because they're talking about increasing it from 5 years to 10 years. So whereas we're trying to go forward, we're trying to preserve democracy, create a better Dominica, a stronger democracy. It seems like there are forces out there which are bent on taking us backwards. So I really do not know how it is going to play out, but I have some level of confidence in the ability of people to think for themselves and to voice their concerns to their elected representatives. Because as I've said, this isn't a political position that I've taken. It's not based on politics. Having a strong electoral system, a strong democracy, is good for any country. And, it really does not matter at the end of the day which government forms the next, or which political party or group of people form the next government. It's not about the outcome. It's about ensuring that you have a fair process so that, the majority, the true majority, they can determine, how the country is governed. So I do not know, what position the government will take. They have a well, they have a majority in parliament. So the outcome of this process, the final wording of the legislation would really depend on the position of the government. I would hope that good sense will prevail and that the interest of country over, selfish reasons or, that the interest of Dominica and democracy would be put first rather than any selfish motivation.
Again, as we about to bring that all important discussion to a wrap here, I heard you stress from the beginning in terms of we getting it right as a people. I just wanted to reinforce that point that we are at a crucial point now. If we don't get it right as a people, we may just be looking at a do or die situation for Dominica. And in all that, what can you advise the people now, the general public out there, the ordinary Dominicans? How can they help in protecting that democracy that you spoke so highly of tonight?
Yes. I think that ordinary people can help by listening to their conscience and speaking up. Take a position, a right position, a position that makes sense. It really, certain things are just so simple. You cannot have a country which is ruled or where the sitting government is determined by people who do not live there. Where people, especially in a situation where the migration rate is increasing and, we're selling citizenship like hot bread. So take a position and voice your position. Go to your parliamentary representative, regardless of who that parliamentary representative is, and make your position known. Express your concerns about Dominica. Do not be fooled by, payments or any assurance that, these people, they won't return to Dominica. There's no risk involved. Speak up, recognize that there is a risk of us losing Dominica to foreign powers, and make your position be known. Insist that the government does the right thing in order to protect our democracy. There is power in the people. You have the power ultimately, because at the end of the day, when elections are called, your vote contributes to determining who forms the next government. So yes, I would just call on all Dominicans to let their voices be heard and to take a position which is in the best interest of Dominica and which is not simply along political lines.
Cara, thank you very much. Just before Alvin comes and give us his final, take for tonight on tonight's conversation, let me just read some compliments coming your way, Cara, from Brother Dale Dangleben. Says here, proud of Cara Shillingford, an honest and trustworthy young woman. We need more like her. And put that in exclamation marks here. Shame on the likes of Ruby Blanc for their silence.
Thank you, Mr. Dangleben.
Yes, we also have Marceline Edwards writing here. The final say is we, the people. It's time to realize that power. You stressed that very, very eloquently a while ago in terms of Marceline points about the people. Althea Rennie is writing here. Great job, Cara. Hats off to you. Shame on those who know better, but because of the obsession with money, refuse to do better.
Thank you.
Who else we have in terms of compliments? Everlasting Peter writes, Ms. Shillingford, thank you for sharing your legal knowledge, personal experiences, and opinions with Dominicans everywhere. And the list goes on, but in the interest of time, people, we have to, sort of bring it down. Cara, 2 hours is basically right there.
Yeah. You see how quickly it went, Cara?
Very, very flew
so
by.
quickly, and there's a lot more we could touch if we stay on again.
Your final thoughts, Brother Alvin?
But no, I would like to start off by thanking Cara for joining us in that conversation this evening. I think she touched on a number of pertinent areas that is worth considering as we move forward on this all-important matter. And like her, I believe that we need to stay engaged. I don't think there's room to chicken out at this stage. Yes, it's not for the faint of heart, but I believe that there are a number of Dominicans back home that should step up. I would hope that folks having heard Cara this evening would be energized by that and would give them some sort of motivation to say something, do something. I would also hope to do that, and I hope the observers are listening. I would take it that they're listening to all the various media houses and various social platforms at this stage to get a sense as to what Dominicans are saying on this matter, that they too would present in a very transparent and honest way their observation and their recommendations to whether it is the commission or to the government, whichever they believe that it has to go to. Over the years, they have presented recommendations, the OAS, CARICOM, and the Commonwealth. And I think having reached at the stage that we are now should be no different. Whatever they recommend or they suggest by way of recommendations as a way forward on this final leg of the journey, that should be made transparent and available to Dominicans. It should be no secret. In other words, whatever they conclude and they present, that should be made available to the Dominican public as they have done in the past. So it is my hope that folks will become more engaged. As I said, we're on to the final rung, or maybe with the last lap of the relay, and therefore we cannot run that race. So again, Cara, thank you for sharing with us this evening. We appreciate that. We had not even touched on the question of access to the media, which is a very major issue, but hopefully we will engage again sometime in the future as we continue with that discussion and the process.
Okay.
And to our many fans who stayed with us throughout, you cannot recognize them. I must recognize them. The comments came in, but the discussion was going so lively with Cara that we were not able to dive into as many of the comments. But we want to thank them for staying with us and share the information, talk to each other, and let's see how we can get this thing going.
All right. Thank you very much, Brother Alvin, for your final comments here. Cara, I'll give you your final thoughts now as we leave again from the Civic Vibes team. We want to say thank you very much. Time well spent tonight.
Okay, thank you once again, Loftus and Alvin, for inviting me on this platform. And thank you to the viewers, the listeners, who took time out of their Sunday afternoon where, they might be watching some movie or doing something else and participating in this very important program and listening. I appreciate your contributions, the compliments, etc. I appreciate that. Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, Cara.
Dominicans, why, Dominicans, we need our electoral reform. Tell Simbad, call the cabinet. Our money can just go to waste like that. Dominicans, spend your money. You should perform your duty. How long before we get our reform? We have some elections in the interest of one man. But like Egypt, the people need freedom. If you cannot deliver, then give us back our dollars, sir. Stay in your lane. We know our country love to spend big money, sir. Stay in your lane. The people frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before the fall house break. The people know of Cool Wars Brigade. May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what we pay, Guy Pool Dominicans, Dominicans, we need to fight for what we believe. Enough talking, time for action. We need reform, we need our protest card. The people pressurizing, yes, they're ready for action. How long before we get our reform? If we vote without protest ID, we could vote for a dead family. And before ballot don't count, landslide victory. The election legacy concerns everybody, sir. Stay in your lane. We hear you write a report to Annie Valdez boy. Stay in your lane. The people frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before reform we take. The people know of Pool was brigade. May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what we pay, Guy Pool was it.
All right, Dominicans, thank you very, very much indeed, as we must bring this program to a wrap tonight. Already 10 minutes past the good old hour of 8 o'clock. We want to thank Cara Shillingford for taking time off this Sunday, 2 hours that is, and really, really coming to speak to us, the Dominican public, tonight as to what she thinks is needed as the best way forward for us in Dominica for freer, fairer, and more transparent general elections. Alvin Thomas, thank you very much. Yes. The Civic Vibes team. What would be that program be without you guys listening and participating, the multitudes of you out there as well? Thank you very, very much indeed. So folks, until next week Sunday, same time, same place, yours truly, Loftus Duran and Alvin Thomas saying bye-bye. We're going to give you the last verse of Brother Checo. Thank you very much indeed, Checo, for doing this number.
Stop you spreading your magic, you can fool everybody, sir. Stay in your lane. We need free registration for free and fair elections, sir. Stay in your lane. The people reject your reports of Byron. Dominicans know the difference between right and wrong. Give us reform before next election. The people ready to take a stand to make this country a democratic one. Dominicans want the reform for what they pay. Oh, Guy Pool
Electoral reform is essential, fundamental, absolutely necessary, the basis for democracy.
If you cannot deliver, then give us back our dollars, sir. Stay in your lane. We know you know our country loves to spend big money, sir. Stay in your lane. The people frustrated and tired. Dominicans have taken all they can take. Give us reform before the fall house break. The people know of Pool was brigade. May 29 and blood that was shed. So if you don't deliver for what we pay, Guy